You say test.
Testing.
See, it has to be muted. Mute is where you're hearing the feedback, which is not going to work. Okay, go ahead.
Testing.
No, it's not going to work that way. Let's see if that gives me feedback. You do a test, Mary?
Yep. Test.
Go ahead.
Test.
I mean, is that Mel?
It's Natalie. Oh, she's responding again. It's good now. Okay, thank you.
Okay, item 4.2, public comment. The board welcomes comment and matters of district interest. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak? Seeing none, we're moving on. Presentations, 5.1, King Consulting.
Okay.
Developer fee justification study overview.
All right. Hi, Jamie. Can you hear me?
Yes, Superintendent Gaviola. It's nice to see and hear you. Good evening, board members.
Awesome. Jamie, I'm going to make you a co-host. So you can share your screen unless you want me to click through for you. It's totally
Nope,
up to you.
that's perfect. Nope,
Okay.
I'll go ahead and share my screen, no problem. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, everybody. My husband grew up in the Central Valley, went to Cal Poly along with his sister, and we love the Central Coast, and we appreciate the opportunity to be able to support your district. So thanks for having me.
Okay, just 1 second. Just 1 second, Jamie.
No problem. I can tell the board a little bit about our firm while I wait.
That sounds great.
We are a small consulting firm of 6 people located in Sacramento, California, to be close to the California Department of Ed and Division of State Architect. My primary specialty over the last 25 years has been supporting school districts all throughout the state, small and large, mostly small though, that's our specialty, with state school facility program funding, developer fees. We also do demographic analysis, enrollment projections, audit and expenditure reporting, grant writing. I've purposefully kept the firm small so that we have just a handful, there's 6 of us, of experts in their kind of own individual area of expertise. And I'm excited to be here tonight to talk to you about developer fees. Part of what I want to talk to you about tonight is just to, we're in the process of preparing a study for you that's not quite ready yet. But I wanted to talk to you tonight to just give you kind of an overview of what developer fees are, what the, the history of developer fees has been in California, and how that burden really is on you as a district to collect the fees, what they can be used for, how districts fund capital facilities. I think that's really important for you and your community to understand, because as we all know, there's not a lot of funding out there for school facilities.
Jamie, I'm going to click through because I think it'll be easier, because this little guy doesn't want me to share with you for some
That's
reason.
okay. You don't want to allow me to share, it's fine.
Okay. I am a little concerned right now. It's not showing up the way it typically does. So just give me, here we go. There we go.
There we
Okay,
go.
perfect.
Perfect. And you know, it's funny, you think after all these years of COVID and Zooming that we would have managed our technical issues by now, but you are not alone. Every time I Zoom, it seems, whether it's with a client or with a partner of ours or with the state, it's there's always something that comes up. So like I said, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the history of developer fees, the overview, what you could use them on, the allowable uses per the government code. There's a lot of conversations that happen around that, but it's really clearly written out in the government code. And then the funding opportunities for district growth or reconstruction. Where do you get it? What's the true cost to reconstruct or to construct facilities as compared to the level 1 statutory fee? And then talk to you a little bit about future development as well and the impact to facilities that has. So if you click through to the next slide, I'll talk to you a little bit about the history of developer fees. So AB 2926 in 1986 first granted school districts the authority to impose developer fees. What's interesting is at that time, a city or a county could actually stop a development from happening and moving forward. They could refuse to issue building permits to the school district or to the builder if the school district argued that their impact had not been fully mitigated by the developer. Well, developers didn't like that. And so with the passage of SB 50 in 1998, which was written in part by developers, a cap was placed on the amount that could be charged under the level 1 fee calculation. And the level 1 fee is really the statutory fee. There's never a lot of pushback on it. It's kind of accepted statewide that developers will pay these level 1 fees. A level 2 fee is district specific and is a much more rigorous test of that nexus of growth, real aggressive growth compared to facility capacity. The research demonstrates, so in 1998, SB 50 kind of shifted the burden from the cities to the school district. So now it is your fiduciary responsibility to determine A, are we justified to collect the fee, and B, to actually collect the fee if you are justified. So, you know, research, and this is well known throughout the state, demonstrates that the impact of new development is actually significantly higher than anything that you will ever collect in developer fees. So it really is imperative, and we encourage and recommend to all of the school districts we work with, as does the Coalition for Adequate School Housing and CASBO, to be collecting the maximum level, the maximum developer fee that you are justified to collect. In regards to the fees themselves, fees are not paid until a building permit is actually pulled.
Hey, Jamie, do you want
Yes.
questions throughout the presentation or
Sure.
at the end?
It doesn't matter. I feel like sometimes some of the questions might be answered as part of the presentations, but I'm happy to take questions now.
That would be up to the board then.
Sure.
I just had a quick question on the research. That's all.
Okay, Jamie, I think it appears like they might wait till the end.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect. So the fees are collected at the time that, oh, sorry, go back really quick. The fees are collected at the time the building permits are pulled. You're currently collecting the 2014 statutory fees. So the fee goes up every 2 years in January as it correlates to the construction cost index in California. And though that fee is increased by the State Allocation Board, which is made up of members of the Department of Finance, California Department of Education, various state legislators as well. And so we expect that fee is going to go up again in January last year. That fee went up to $4.79. Because you're an elementary school district, you collect, you can be justified to collect a portion of that fee. Or if the high school district that you feed into doesn't have their own study completed and is not collecting a fee, then you could collect the entire fee. Right now, you're collecting it based on a fee split agreement at $2.24 a square foot for residential and 34 cents per square foot for commercial industrial. So how are they charged? Developer fees are charged for each square foot of residential and commercial industrial construction within a school district per Ed Code 17620. Again, they're capped at the beginning of every even numbered year. In 2022, the maximum rates were $4.79. So had you done a study and you were collecting the current level 1 fee, you'd be collecting $3.59 a square foot and 58 cents per square foot of the commercial industrial development in your district.
Oh, and just a quick note is that in our research and combined with what Jamie was asking us to provide, in 2019, the school board adopted Schoolworks, excuse me.
Schoolworks.
Yeah, Schoolworks to do a justification study because it was the 5 years that it occurred. So it was at the right time. So they approved that in October. So that it usually takes anywhere from 2 to 4 months in that process. Well, what happened during that time is COVID. So in March, as you guys know, 2020, school shut down, all of that occurred. So Schoolworks did in fact complete the study and sent the study to Cayucas. It just never came to the board. So the board never considered an increase 5 years ago of the rate. And that's just part of the craziness of what was happening with the shutdown of school, with a global pandemic. And so now we're sitting here in 2023 at 2014, but it does make sense on that timeline of why that occurred. And that was, we checked that down with Liz's institutional memory as well. So we appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for pointing that out. And I should mention that these studies are valid for 5 years from the time that they're prepared. But we recommend that you update them every 2 years. So there's, you know, if you are collecting a fee now based on a study that was done in 2014, it just leaves you really kind of wide open to litigation because you haven't justified the nexus since that time. So it's they're required to be updated every 5 years if you're collecting a fee at all. And then we recommend you update them every 2 years because construction costs change, the nexus might change. And so that's a good point. Thanks for pointing that out. So what can you use developer fees on? And we do these studies for districts all throughout the state. We work with multiple different attorneys' offices. We've worked with districts who've had their studies challenged before, but it's very clear in the government code that you can expend developer fees solely for the purpose of which the fees were collected as detailed through government code 66000 through 66003. And you can use them for the construction or the reconstruction of school facilities to accommodate enrollment generated by development. So to quote the government code, a fee shall not include the costs attributed to existing deficiencies in public facilities, but may include the costs attributable to the increased demand for public facilities reasonably related to the development project in order to refurbish existing facilities to maintain the existing level of service or to achieve an adopted level of service that is consistent with the general plan. So, you know, there's a lot, the majority of school districts in California right now are adopting their studies based on the need to reconstruct facilities. So that could be, I can give you a for example. So if you had over the next 20 years, because it's a projection of students, that you are going to have 200 students generated from 10 students a year generated from new development in your district. With the absence of that development and all other things being equal, you could potentially shutter 8 classrooms and not modernize them at all, not keep them open. You wouldn't necessarily need to maintain all your ancillary facilities, all your toilet facilities. And so it's kind of widely accepted that these funds can be used to construct new facilities to house students generated from new development, to replace portables that are old and aged and have exceeded their useful life expectancy, or to maintain permanent facilities at the existing level of service. Because those permanent facilities are going to continue to house those students, where in the absence of those students being generated, potentially you would be declining in enrollment and you wouldn't need them all. So really quickly, I think it's important, and we always want to share with our clients and with districts and communities, how do districts receive funding for capital facilities? There aren't that many places. So if you go to slide 8, you have developer fees. So you have the statutory fee, you have the level 2 fee, which is a much more rigorous test. I have no clients that are collecting a level 2 fee right now, except for one in the Central Valley where they've got a significant amount of development. And then you have level 3 fees, which is the level 2 fee that's doubled if the state runs out of money in the state school facility program. And then you also have things like mitigation agreements. If there's a big development that comes in, probably not likely for your community, and it's going to have an impact, and they say, we don't want to pay our fees, but we'll give you some land instead, or we don't want to pay fees, you have some land, we'll build a school on that, and then for you in lieu of paying fees. Then you have local funding, things like general obligation bonds that you can spend on capital facilities, parcel taxes, LCFF, joint use and community partnerships and redevelopment funds. Not a lot of local funding without collecting developer fees or passing a GO bond for capital facilities to maintain facilities for those students generated by development. And then you have state and federal funding, but most all of these programs require that you have that district local funding match. So you have the state school facility program that requires a match. You have the California Energy Commission, things like CalShape that are happening right now. State water resource boards for some things, FEMA ESSERs for emergencies, COVID money, and then governor's budget allocations in times of emergencies or in times of special programs that become available. So if you go to slide 9, understanding the true cost to house students. So we've done this analysis for districts all up and down the state, as far north as Humboldt County, all the way south to Imperial County. So, and what we use is that we work with a lot of construction managers throughout the state. And so we understand that the cost per square foot to construct or modernize facilities varies by region and by district, but we are working in San Luis Obispo right now. We're working in Templeton right now. We're working in Buellton right now. So we have real projects that we look at. And then we narrow that down by break that down by a cost per square foot to modernize or build something new per student. And the collecting the level 1 developer fee is far below what the actual true cost is. Not only does the level 1 fee fall short of the classroom spaces themselves, whether you're modernizing or constructing new, but they don't account for impact to ancillary facilities. And that's absolutely something that you can spend your developer fees on, are ancillary facilities and support spaces for those students. Toilets, gyms, libraries, cafeteria, outdoor and athletic facilities, site improvements like parking and access, drop off and pickup, site acquisition, increased operational costs. These are not fees you can spend your developer fees on. The operational costs, salaries and benefits, and instructional programs and maintenance and transportation. But again, the absence of students generated from new development, potentially you could reduce, many of these costs. And then here's an example of the developer fee shortfall. So assuming 5 homes are built each year, you've already collected $60,000 less than you could have since 2016, the first year that you had the opportunity but didn't update your level 1 fee. And then in CESD, even with a relatively low rate of student generation, you would collect approximately $45,000 for each student generated. The same student creates a facility cost of $94,673 for new construction. And that's a shortfall for new construction. The shortfall for modernization is about 60% of that price, which is still very near to, or which still falls above the cost that you're going to collect in developer fees. And then finally, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a lot of questions and comments we get from districts in the Humboldt County right now that are implementing fees for the very first time, from districts that haven't implemented their fee or updated their fee in many, many years. We get asked things like, what if we adopt a lower amount, or we want to adopt until a later date? This is not recommended by any attorney that we work for, nor is it recommended by us. It's really arbitrary and not based on empirical data. You really introduce an increased risk of litigation and scrutiny. So if you aren't treating everyone the same that comes in with that fee, and you're giving some people a lower fee and these other people you're charging up to that fee, you just really put yourself at risk for litigation. And obviously, if you're not collecting the maximum fee that you're justified to collect, it's going to impact your financials. The timeline, people ask, well, can we wait to adopt the fee for another year or another couple of years? I mean, you can adopt a fee at any time. Ultimately, it's a board decision. But the longer you wait, and that's why you'll kind of feel this now, right? Is because you're collecting the fee from 2014, where if you had been incrementally increasing the fee every 2 years, it wouldn't feel like such a big jump in the fee, because we do expect it to be over $5 in January when it gets increased. And then who pays the fee? The fee is only paid on new construction. So if you have an existing resident that tears down their house and they rebuild their house and they don't exceed their square feet by more than a net gain of 500, then they're not going to pay fees. If you have somebody who moves into the district and they decide to tear down an existing house and rebuild the house or add on to it, you don't pay on any existing square footage unless it exceeds an additional 500 square feet. There's also some considerations right now of increased enrollment growth due to the implementation of universal transitional kindergarten. That's not the nexus that we're going to be proving in this study, because it's not that you can justify collecting a fee based on adding a grade level, but you are going to have that impact to your capacity in your facilities as that program becomes fully implemented. And it will create the need for more spaces as you go down. You shrink your teacher ratio from 25:1 to 12:1 at the TK level. So it is going to affect your capacity, and that's going to affect your ability to house those students. There's also the consideration of, and it's not a comment in here, but there's also the consideration of the governor and the legislature right now in California really easing the burden on developers to develop more affordable housing, and to kind of ease the restrictions on CEQA, which is a California Environmental Quality Act, so that to kind of get rid of the red tape and make it easier for them to develop. And we've seen in areas up and down the state a real uptick in development. And so there's a consideration of that as well. And then also consideration of being proactive when reactive and not reactive when planning for facilities, because whether you're putting down one new classroom or you're looking to modernize some classrooms to maintain that existing level of service, you have to schools are the second safest buildings in California, second only to hospitals. And you have to go through the Division of State Architect more often than not for structural, fire, life and safety and accessibility approvals, and the California Department of Education whenever you want to add to or modernize your facilities. So those are just some topics for discussion and some thoughts and consideration as you have your discussion about developer fees. And that is all I have. I'm happy to answer questions.
And I'll keep the slideshow up just as questions are asked. I can try to navigate what slide it's on. I think that will be helpful for people to follow.
I have several questions.
Go ahead.
So on slide 4,
Yep.
in the very beginning, this is Carrie Friend.
Hi,
On the
Carrie.
Developer fee, hello, developer fee history. You said research demonstrates the true impact of new development is much higher than what developer fees will cover. So it's imperative for school districts to collect their maximum developer fees. And in the presentation, you just said it's well-known research. I'm not a fan of developer fees at the moment, so I'll just put that out here right out front. When you say research demonstrates, what research? To me, I want to know sources. I mean, what research is that? Because I've been on the board for 8 years before now. I was off for 4 and now I'm back. And this was always a hot topic for me. So I'm curious, the word research demonstrates is a little bit too vague for me.
I absolutely understand. I have actual data that I can provide to Superintendent Gaviola that she can share with the board following this meeting. I didn't put that level of detail in here, but I'm happy to provide you with, I've got a plethora of examples of the cost to house the students and the number of fees you'll collect versus the true cost using actual projects where they're adding classrooms to sites, or where they're modernizing sites, and what the cost per square foot is per student. as it compares to the developer fees that were collected to house the students.
I don't want to hog it, you guys. I have a whole bunch of questions, so.
Just keep going.
Well, I
I just make a comment.
Oh,
Go ahead,
go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
go ahead, no.
Well, just a comment on that. That classroom we built was $1 million.
Yep.
That's mind boggling. And again, it's because of the things you pointed out, having to use certain, certain I mean, I hadn't heard that before. Hospitals being the highest level at that
Yep.
school. But I could see it, just the cost of building that, so.
Yeah, the foundational work and then the restructuring with that retaining wall and foundation was a huge extra
That's a
cost. Yeah.
simple,
You'd
not
think,
that much square
yeah.
footage.
Yep.
Crazy.
Well, there was a lot of dirt work.
Well, right, but that's still,
But,
wasn't
you know,
appropriate
my
use of
concern is, I'm not an anti-developer fee person, but I'm just wondering how we can justify it in our community. We don't have much development going on, at most, maybe 5 houses are built a year.
if that.
If that, there's not very many vacant lots at all, in town, and I'm just wondering how open we are, for somebody to come and litigate against us, saying that we do not have a justification for collecting developer fees because there is no development, and any development that is going on is not impacting our school.
For maintenance, to maintain the facilities, right?
But a developer, from what I understand, that as a developer, when you pay this fee, it's to go to the school on what on your development activity as it impacts the school.
Look at slide
Then
6,
there's-
look at slide 6, that's. where-
Sure.
The second bullet on slide 6 states that the district developer fees must be used for the construction or reconstruction of school facilities. This is the big part, to accommodate enrollment generated by new development.
And I don't think we can look at the past 20 years and say development has had any impact.
Or to
On our
refurbish
school.
existing facilities.
But generated by new development.
I don't disagree that we need to
Well, maybe Jamie can comment, since that's the
refurbish
question.
facilities as they age. But my argument is that development is not impacting our school enrollment.
Well, maybe Jamie could comment. then.
Yep.
And so
I mean, with the absence of that development over the last 20 years, you would have, all else things being equal, without any new development and any new students entering your district from that new development, even if it's only 5 homes a year, a couple students a year, over the course of 10 years, you could have shuttered a classroom and not used it and not maintained it. So even in the smallest of districts where all development has an impact on your district, because those homes generate kids for you to educate. So
the thing we need to look at is, and I don't know the data now, but I do remember a few years back, looking at it, where only 40% of the homes in our school district have full-time residents in it. And so, that's another question. A lot of the homes that are being built here are vacation homes. So there is no impact on school enrollment.
So I think the question is, we have 2 people who are worried about litigation because they're saying we're not really growing the students. But if we're legally, if it's legally acceptable to collect these fees, even to maintain the facilities, that's an acceptable use, correct, Jeannie?
yeah, absolutely. And even if, we hear this a lot, we're doing studies up in Humboldt. People are buying second homes. They're coming here. The reality is, once that home is constructed, for the life of that home, there could be a student generated out of that home. Maybe it's not now, but maybe it's 5 years from now. So it's not, you're looking over the entire life of that home. And that's why homes that are already there will get a credit if they're torn down, or if they add to it and they don't add beyond the 500 square feet. The reality is that homes overall, when you are building a home, you are increasing the capacity of housing in your community. And those homes will generate students, some measure of them for you to house. And so they will therefore have an impact, and maybe what they're being built for now isn't how they're going to be used 5 years from now. If somebody decides to sell that vacation home to a family who moves into the area, and then you have a student to house. So there's not really an easy way to draw a one-to-one correlation, but it's very clear in the government code that development has an impact. Like I said, developer fee law was written in part by developers. They were part of the drafting of the government code. And it's widely acknowledged and accepted that they have to pay these very low statutory level 1 fees. They pay impact fees to the city as well, not just to the school district and as a public entity, just like the city and or the county. It is, we consider it, and it's widely considered that your fiduciary responsibility to your community is to be collecting these fees to maintain the existing level of service of your facilities for students that will be generated from new development.
That's the part I have a question about, generate or to accommodate enrollment generated by new development. We historically have not have experienced an increasing enrollment.
Mm-hmm.
Fact, it's been declining. So,
Yep.
I mean, we don't have a crystal ball to see how it's going to be used in 10 years. So if it's supposed to accommodate enrollment generated by new development and we don't have increasing enrollment, but just the opposite, how can we justify collecting these developer fees when we don't have increasing enrollment?
So the majority of school districts in California that are collecting level 1 fees right now are declining in enrollment. You are not alone, whether you're stable or slightly declining. The majority of school districts are. The reality is that communities have turnover, and with the absence of the development, any new homes being constructed, you would likely just be in a steady decline, and you wouldn't need to maintain the facilities that you have. So over the last 20 years, I mean, I'm 51. I have a 12-year-old kid. My husband and I bought our home when he was born, and we'll live in that home and well until after he's out of college and probably when he has his own kids. So homes have a life cycle. And so, homes generate students over time. And so while you might say, well, we're in declining enrollment, that doesn't preclude you from justifying this nexus between, in the absence of any new development, you would very likely be looking at shuttering some classrooms, not needing to employ as many teachers, without the students that had been generated, and without going back and getting every address of every home that's been built over the last 10 or 20 years in your district and comparing that to the student lists that you have over the last 10 or 20 years. It's not really plausible to draw a one-to-one correlation between the houses that were built and the students that were generated. But again, it's widely accepted that the new houses do generate students for you to house.
Trustee Brownell has a question for you, Jamie.
Actually, it's not.
Or a
for me.
statement?
No,
Okay.
it might be for Liz. Liz, how long have you been here?
She's at 13 or 14?
Does anybody have any idea what the
Mhm.
20-year
Mhm.
enrollment? has
Yeah,
been?
so
Like
part
the
of-
Last 20 years,
Mhm.
what's our,
Part of Jamie's presentation, when she does the justification study, will actually have all of that information on it.
okay,
Yep.
'cause I'd like to know, for my own.
Yeah.
like, mine, and it's kind of fascinating in light of what.
It
Gary
is, yeah.
talking about. So I'd like to know what our student population was 20 years ago.
Sure.
15 years ago, like just boom, 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 and then, because I think she did quote, a projection of 20 years from now, how we could explode, which I don't know if I agree with that, but who knows? We don't know.
Right.
But we don't have to, but
We can provide that information to the board even prior to Jamie's presentation, but it will be in that one as well.
But
But
like-
we'll follow up with
what
that.
Jamie said, that's pretty common. I read something, I think there's only one county in the state that has growing enrollment overall. That's just the state of California. As Jamie pointed out, that's pretty common, I think.
That they're declining.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. if
I
that's-
do recall we had a blip. Was it 2000? 2006, 2007.
Small.
Yeah, it was, well, no, it was actually a fairly major blip where people, because of the economy, were moving
Oh,
into their
right.
grandparents' homes here. And so I believe, I mean, we were not renewing, IDTs because of that. And,
But that's not a hurdle we have to pass, because she said,
yeah.
it's the fact that new buildings are coming in has the potential.
I really like just the explanation for me, I will say, when she talks about the capacity
Right.
of the home, the home life cycle kind of was a light bulb for me of understanding some of that. And I'm not saying plus or minus on it, but I really appreciated that description. Because I think of it in terms of, my staffing and, are we generating, 0.32 students per house that's built or things like that when I look at staffing. But it shifted my thinking when you talked about just the general capacity of the town and the life cycle or home, like that family cycle that could go into that home at one time or another. That was a really interesting point.
Well, I want to clarify something too. I'm not against developer fees per se. What I didn't like, what this board did was spend it on that classroom. Because
Legally justified.
Well, let me just finish.
Sorry.
Let me finish. So developer fees, fine, collect that, but it's very clear on what it's being spent on. And so if it's not being spent because of increased enrollment, that's where the issue gets muddy. Because the district was not increased. I'm not saying we didn't need a new classroom. I just don't think the funds should have come from developer fees. So I guess I need more education on exactly what is acceptable for developer fees, because the ed code says to reconstruct or construct facilities to accommodate enrollment generated by new development. And if we're not having more enrollment, how can those developer fees money be going to spend on something different?
If I could interject, so I think there's this disconnect, and I know that it's true because I have these conversations with so many of my clients and so many of the attorneys that we work with. The disconnect is that people say, oh, well, we're not growing in enrollment, so development's not having an impact, because you say you correlate growth by kids generated from development as enrollment growth, right? It just makes sense to do. But the reality is that the growth that you're having from the development is impacting your facilities, even though you're not increasing in enrollments, because in the absence of it, you'd be having even more significant declines in enrollment, and you wouldn't have the need for those kids to maintain those facilities. And developer fees don't have to be spent in a classroom. Those can be spent in support spaces as well. The ed code is really clear on this. The government code is really clear. So things like support service spaces for counselors, admin, not things like district office admin at the site, to be clear. Those locations where students are being provided services, it's for any facility at that campus, not just for the classroom space and to increase capacity.
So I was on the board when we did that building, and we had outside counsel. It was justified to spend those funds on that classroom. And the county office also concurred that it was. So we did look into it. I know you never agreed. 'Cause you were
Yeah.
I
after it,
still don't
Yeah.
agree, but
And we spent legal fees again because of you proving.
I'm not apologizing.
All right, but it's justified. We looked into it.
Are there others? So that, okay, let me just tell you next steps, and then Jamie, if there's anything else. So Jamie's firm is now looking exactly at what Trustee Brownell had talked about. This gives us the general definition process, gives us thought process and time to really think about this. Then she will bring back specific Cayucas Elementary School District data around homes being built, fees being collected, enrollment over time. And then she's going to give the board a recommendation based on all that specific Cayucas information. Then the board can take a recommendation or not. And that will be the discussion that's done, or ask further questions. and then look at our next steps around it. But the process has to be done every 5 years around the justification study. And then Jamie, or separately from that, we would have an attorney tell us any type of, because I heard the word liability a lot, legal liability around our decisions. So at that first meeting, she brings it forward. If we're leaning towards a certain way, say it isn't to increase to the full state amount, or say it is there legal liability that we should be aware of? Josh Whiteside from Lozano Smith is typically the guru around that piece of information. Like, it's kind of his specialty. But we can look at other counsel as well. And so then bringing back to the board the next time, any of those potholes of our unintended consequences of our decisions. Like, we're trying to make the best decision possible for the district, for the community, for our fiscal responsibility. And then sometimes, like, we don't have all the answers. So are there little potholes that we might be stepping in that we're unaware of?
I also have another question.
That's a great point.
If for some reason we do decide to not collect the developer fees, how easy is it to, if some development, large development does occur, how easy is it to reinstate it?
Yeah, that's a great question for Jamie.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, again, you want to be proactive in planning for facilities, not reactive. I think if if you're collecting fees, it's been my experience anyway, and I'm so glad to hear that you work with Lozano Smith. We work with Junaid Halini up here, and I literally quoted him so many times tonight in my presentation with you. They are wonderful, and they understand the legality of developer fees far more than I do. But if it becomes, I think you leave yourself open to more litigation. If you wait, if a developer sees that you haven't been collecting fees at all, and then all of a sudden he, is proposing a development, and you quickly work to do a study and implement a fee, I think that that's gonna, from my perspective, and I would defer to Lozano Smith, but I think you leave yourself open to litigation from that developer who says, oh, well, you haven't been levying fees on anyone who's been developing, and, you've had 10 units built a year. I'm building 50, and all of a sudden you want to implement a fee. I think it becomes more difficult for you, just like it becomes more difficult when you're not increasing it every couple of years. And there are districts adjacent to you that are collecting a fee. I think it kind of shines a light on, well, why haven't they been, and why are they just now? But I would defer to, I think that's a good question for Lozano Smith as well, because that would be the risk. I think you would be justified then, just like I think you're going to be justified now. It's just a question of, how risk averse are you, and do you want to leave yourself kind of more open to litigation at that time?
I appreciate that. Trustee Brownell has a comment or question as well.
Do we have do we have any money, developer fees right now? Or do we spend it all on that building and we don't have any more, or how?
Yep. So we did spend all the money on the building, and then per the resolution, any developer fees that were collected since the closing of the building in August, then at the close of the fiscal year, which is June 30th, gets transferred to the repayment of the general fund contribution to the building, which was $500,000. So I believe that amount is $26,000 with some change that was transferred at the closing of the books. So because we have that active resolution in place. So that is what will happen year in and year out until the $500,000 is repaid to the general fund, or the board creates a different resolution. Yeah.
So I remember when I was on the board before, and I don't know if this is true or not, it was just brought up at a meeting. If the developer fees that are collected on any given year aren't expended in 5 years, do they have to be returned? I remember hearing that.
No, there's an annual and 5-year reporting that you're required to do every year.
So if they're not spent, you just keep it until you finally spend it.
I remember that too, Carrie.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. Hey, I'm sorry, I had one other follow-up question. You talked about on the 3 kind of large buckets of funding sources. One of them, of course, is facilities grants that you apply for. do you have to be at the state level for your match to count, or you just have to be collecting developer fees?
There are programs at the state where you are required to be collecting the statutory fee in order to qualify to participate in the program, and that's the state school facility program.
Okay, yeah, that's what I had recalled, but I wasn't quite sure. I appreciate that.
Collecting the maximum. so that we
Yeah,
want-
not all of them, but there are certain ones that do require that for
There
us.
are, and the reason being, and thanks for bringing that up, Superintendent Gaviola, that is, am I saying your last name right, by the way, Gaviola?
You're saying it perfectly, yes.
Okay,
yeah.
right, I'm never
Yeah.
quite sure. The reason being is that the state says, you know, the taxpayers have committed these bond funds to you. We want to be sure that, you know, you're doing your due diligence as a district and that you are kind of, you know, levying these fees, you know, kind of maximizing your local contribution to the project. So most of the projects are a 50-50 match or a 60-40. And so the state wants to be sure that for some of the programs that you're levying the maximum fee that you can.
Okay, Jamie, are you thinking that the justification study would be coming back in November, December? What is your timeline?
I mean, I think it could come back. You have a 14-day noticing period. So the way that the process works is that we'll get the draft study done, and at the pleasure of the board, we could come back. We could present the draft study, Superintendent Gaviola, to you, and then we would do a 14-day noticing period to present the draft study to the board. You have to publicly notice it in the newspaper 14 and 10 days prior. And then we come to the board, we share the study with you, and then you choose to adopt it or not. If you choose not to adopt it, if you want changes to the study, then we can go away. We can, you know, add more information to the study. We can come back to another meeting. But I think at this point, the soonest that we could have the study done in a 14-day notice would be your November board meeting. You're not allowed to start collecting the higher fee for a period of 60 days. And being that we're so close right now to that January board meeting where they're going to raise the fee again, you know, there are some decisions that will probably need to be made as to whether, and I'd like to have a conversation with your legal counsel if the board decides to move forward. Can we go ahead and justify you with this study, and then just increase the fee in January with a simple resolution, leaning on this study to increase it to the higher fee. So in other words, adopt the study in November at the current level. And then after they increase the fee in January, just go back to the board with a resolution to increase it to the new fee. But those are kinds of questions for legal that we need to get answered. But yes, Jen, sorry, that was a long answer to your short question. November would be the soonest we would bring the draft to the board.
Does that sound okay to the board? Yeah. Okay. That's wonderful, Jamie. I really appreciate your time and your clarity. You did a very nice job.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to meet you all. And I hope next time I am there in person.
We do too. Great. Thank
All
you
right,
so
thanks,
much.
everybody. Good night.
Good night.
That's good.
Yeah, it gives us a lot to think about for sure. Yep.
All right, item 5.2, Associated Student Body.
So just really quickly, next board meeting, we will have students here. We are currently in the process, which works out perfectly, of electing our new Associated Student Body officials. They are, if you walk around the school advertising, the posters are amazing, really. I mean, yes, darling, creative, and just fantastic. So our hot race, I will let you know, is the vice president. We have two young men who decided to run to president and co-presidents together. There is no one running against them. But they would really like to share the duties and responsibilities, which I think is going to be wonderful. And so we're very pleased with that. So basically, the informational meeting was September 5th for the kiddos. They had a submission of intent between September 6th and 8th, where they got parent permission, also teacher sponsors, and they turned in their candidate application. They are campaigning now. And then on Monday's flagpole, we are doing two things: a recognition of the Constitution and Citizenship Day, as well, which is perfect because we're doing our speeches and elections. I mean, you could not have timed that better. And it's wonderful. I know, Roberta, your daughter did it twice as our ASB president. And it's a great time to hear their speeches, some very creative and other ones, are just getting their toes in the water around their candidate speeches. Then they will vote later that day and we will actually announce the winners that day. Then after that opportunity, we will have our ASB candidates go to 4th and 5th grade and they will vote in their classrooms for 4th and 5th grade representatives. So we've started kind of moving into those 4th and 5th grade ages so that we can, generate interest and get those upper grades in the elementary a little bit more involved with those decisions. And they were definitely an active group last year. So that is it for ASB. We do have 2 ASB co-directors this year who are new. We put it out to all of our certificated staff, and Mr. Way, our science/PE teacher, and Miss DeVos, who is our drama teacher, are going to share in that responsibility. And they are thrilled and have some great, exciting plans, which is wonderful.
5.3 PTA.
Liz, do you want to come up and?
Well,
So just make sure the microphone's on up there.
You can only hear it online.
so PTA is, their big push right now is the Fall Carnival, which is on the
28th.
28th of October. So that's what their big push is right now. They had to postpone the meeting from yesterday. It will happen next week, so I'll have more information about, games and everything else, and the type of food they'll be selling and all the fun activities, but they're really looking forward to that. I'm hoping to have just as many and or more activities for the kids. So they continue to support all of our classrooms and our teachers with different supplies, some of the things that they don't necessarily use with their budgets. We were already going to be asking for some funding for some assemblies and some field trips that we're fast and furiously trying to keep separated more than we did last year. Last year, we kind of were cramming towards the very end of school, so we're separating them out, so it's kind of nice now. But PTA is very, very, very supportive of all of our teachers and our kids, school in general, so we've got a lot of great support from them for all of the activities that the kids don't necessarily get to do here, so they get to go out and about. We really appreciate that. So their meeting, if anybody's wanting to help out, is next Tuesday at 6:30. Everybody's welcome.
Thank you, Liz. Oh, yeah. Any questions? Okay.
Thanks.
6.1, regular meeting minutes of August 9th.
So staff does recommend approval. The ones posted do not have some of the revisions that were suggested by board members, but they were not substantial in nature. So they were some clarity around like an and to an and, those type of things. So we will adopt all of those little grammatical or typo type errors, but we do recommend approval.
I have a question, it might not be the right time, but when did we go back to making them so detailed? Did we vote on that, or did I miss something? Because it used to be a one-liner, and then now just a generic of what the essence of what, rather like this is very detailed. And I just wonder, when did we decide to do that?
When Mary was trained, so the County Office of Education provides mentors and then they train. And so when they looked at our minutes, they thought they were a little bit too scarce. And so they encouraged to have a bit more substance, not to be obviously a transcript, but a bit more substance to them. So that's kind of when the transition occurred.
Oh, okay, because
Yep.
I just don't remember them being that detailed, and it's very detailed, and so I imagine it's very cumbersome for her, but I don't know if the board collectively, we like that, or we don't like that, or like, I just didn't know when that got
Yeah.
changed, because it definitely changed.
I like it.
As a person who sat in reading through minutes going back to the 30s and the 20s,
They're on the YouTube for,
whatever.
yeah,
I thought we capped that at a year.
I don't know anything about that. I
I
mean,
thought when we voted for that, we weren't gonna keep it forever and ever, like we.
I think I remember what you're talking about. That was when Pete was here,
Or
right?
maybe, yeah, you
And
weren't here.
I wasn't, I mean, I was in the audience, but I wasn't on the board, but
you
that's
want,
if you host it on your own website, your own server.
Oh, so here, okay, I thought we just decided, because I kept thinking, well, somebody wants the details, that's why
Mhm.
we have the YouTube, so.
I mean, I sometimes prefer to read than to watch. It's a lot faster for me to read through a minutes than it is to go zoom through a video.
yeah, I think there can be a balance. The nice thing about having some girth to your minutes is that then if there is something that you like, I want to find out more about that, then you have the video as, right, a resource. But yeah,
Well, I knew it had changed,
Yeah.
I just didn't know when and how it changed, because I didn't remember us talking about it, and it just changed, so.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for, okay, if everybody wants all the details, I'm fine with the details.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the September 13th regular meeting.
It was Val seconding.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, so this is.
Sorry, Val beat you out.
So this.
No, it's
So
10
this
August
is wrong
ninth.
right here on the agenda. Those three.
Oh.
Oh,
You
wait,
mean not
no,
today's?
this one, sorry.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
The subject.
yeah.
Meetings.
Oh, I was just reading meeting, sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
perfect.
subject.
No, you're right. Okay, I'll take two.
Oh,
I'll
no,
make a
you're
motion
fine.
that we approve the regular meeting minutes of August 9th.
Any further discussion? Trustee Brownell.
Aye.
Trustee Ross.
Aye.
Trustee Castillo.
Aye.
Trustee Friend.
Aye.
Trustee Wright.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
So 7.1, convene open meeting hearing regarding sufficiency or insufficiency of instruction materials for the 23-24 school year.
So this is where we open for a public hearing.
Open for public hearing?
And then I'll just paraphrase, which is California Educational Code 60119 A1B requires the governing board of every local school district to receive state instruction materials and hold an annual public meeting to basically summarize the sufficiency of those materials. So that would be this public hearing for anyone in the public to voice concerns around the materials, the insufficiency of the materials that we supply.
I read that for the first time, I thought it meant, do we have enough?
It does.
Oh, so just, do we have enough?
Yep.
Oh,
It
okay.
does.
Such- Okay.
Yes.
It's wordy.
It's very formal.
Wordy.
Yes.
Like, okay, well, maybe I didn't read that right.
Nope, you're exactly right.
So
Why
there's-
do we say, whatever.
because the government has.
Later on, yeah, later on in the agenda, we will formally say that we have enough, but this was just as an open hearing for the public to give their input around the sufficiency of our materials. Yep.
We'll close the public hearing. Done. Now we're on to 8. We reconvened. Okay, I reconvened. Number 9, information and discussion. 9.1 board member reports.
Val, did you want to start? I believe I saw you at back to school night. Yeah.
It was interesting. I wish I would have a little more time. You know, I think it was in middle school, I think it was 10 minutes per classroom or 15.
It was 10, yes,
How much was it?
10 minutes, yes.
That was really quick.
Yeah,
Yeah, you know, as a past teacher, I would have liked to sat there for a while and learn a little bit more of what students were doing, but it was fun. It was neat to see the connection that teachers gave of the students to those people, the parents that came in to watch. I mean, when you came in a classroom, you knew that there were students there and you knew that your student was a part of it because you could see the differences that they put up on a wall or gave as an example of what they're learning.
Yeah,
So it was fun.
thank you. Yeah, we can't find the magic number. Last year, I believe it was 12 and people felt it was too long. So then I literally rallied for 8, and Liz rallied for 10. So we settled at 10. In the past, we've done elementary and middle on different nights, but then that's felt kind of arduous for parents to have to come back a different night. So this schedule, we did an first session elementary, and then a second session elementary. So if you had 2 elementary school age children, you could go to session A and B. Or if you had an elementary and a middle, you could go to elementary first and then go to middle school. But then we heard from some parents who have 3 and 4 children here. We want them on separate nights with both A and B schedule. You know what I mean? So we're just, we're trying to balance it all out to meet the needs of everybody. We did provide for the first time a pizza truck, so people could, buy a pizza if they wanted to take it home or to eat out and have pizza. And then the district provided pizza for our staff because it's a very long day and there's not a lot of time to go run and get dinner. And so the staff, that they very much appreciated that. And it seemed like the families did too. So slight delay in making the pizzas with some staffing issues with the pizza truck, but it was really delicious, which was great.
The only thing, I just was super excited to see your email to the teachers today on
Mhm.
Constitution Day and Citizenship Day. So, and I looked at all those wonderful resources that you provided all the teachers, so I'm just excited to see that. And,
Well, I appreciate that. Susan and I have been talking about, because we went over the master calendar in one of our meetings together, and she reminded me of it. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so absolutely, it's actually a federal requirement. If you take federal funds, which we do, we have Title I, II, and III funds. And our staff is excited about it. Our librarian already has a plan for Constitution books, as well as our our music teacher, which is, if anyone is roughly in my age range will remember this beautifully, which is she's singing Schoolhouse Rock. If I'm just a bill, sitting on Capitol Hill, all of those lovely songs that help us learn like the actual words to the Constitution and how Congress works, all next week in that. So they're going to see in classroom activities, flagpole, and then also some of our elective base supports, emphasizing that, which is great.
and just the mini tour that we took, I appreciated that.
Yeah.
And definitely just to echo what you said about the library, just it felt clean, it felt organized, and all the kids were having a really good time. So
Great.
I went to the safety meeting and we discussed a lot of what was done over the summer. I don't know if you noticed in the old admin building, the grips, the stairs have been painted, and I assume there's other places. I've heard recall there were other places where that's been done for safety. They've been busy fixing the squirrel holes, the kinder yard has been all fixed. What's the squishy stuff that's under it? What is that called?
Yeah, it's like the fall surface. Yeah,
The
yeah.
padding underneath play equipment has been repaired and all that. There was a lot of discussion about different things that we can do around, just moving different equipment around that teachers have available for them so that they can move books easier and that sort of thing. Then also CIS gives out grants every year, and so there was Ishmael asked for ideas for grant requests, so that needs to be in by December, no less than $500, no more than $25,000. And last year we used the grant money to buy the steps, the movable staircase for the bus barn, and that's really been helpful to Ishmael and Martin. I also went to back to school night, and it was fun being in the middle school, but it was really cool seeing the kindergarten room. I'm like, oh wow, this is where I want to be. And then went to roadshow, with Carrie. And, it was nice to network with other school board members from around the county there, and listen to what the CSBA has to offer us. And then I signed up for Masters in Government.
She
So
did?
I'll be doing that this year.
Yep, you're all set. Huh?
Yep. I have papers for you to sign.
Jeez, that was a lot.
I
I went fishing in Alaska. I don't have any score lately.
know. My house is a mess. Does that make you feel better?
Yeah, that was a lot.
I need to do more.
As Kristen said, went to the roadshow. It was interesting, listening to what they were talking about. One of the most interesting things for me, doesn't really impact us for this district, but about the charter school up in Napa, this going back and forth, the school denied them, and then they appealed, and that got overturned, and they were allowed to open, and this and that. It's still going on right now. So that was just kind of eye-opening that can happen. I'm going to the ethics training on September 25th. That's coming up. We got the emails for that. I missed back to school. I wasn't feeling well,
I
so I
know.
missed that. So I was kind of disappointed, but yeah, I'm glad you're doing Masters in Governance. You're gonna love it.
I hope so.
Yeah, what Carrie's referencing is there was an email that came out, I believe around 3 p.m. today, and it cites Assembly Bill 2158. So in the year of, I believe it's 25-26 school year, there's going to be a requirement of all school board members to have ethics training.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Your invitation was a couple weeks ago, not today.
Oh, no, Dr. Brescia sent an actual RSVP today at 3 p.m. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, you might not even have seen it yet. Yeah, so it's a form that you actually say I'm coming or not coming. So yes, I did
Oh,
send
I sent you the
something.
invite.
Yeah.
That's fine.
But that ethics training, although it's not required this year, what they're doing is like giving everybody that training now so that anyone who's in office now won't have to worry about doing that within the year. Yeah, I believe actually it's the 25-26 school year, but we'll be able to verify that. So the hard part about that is you're an elected official. So there's questions around what is the requirement when the people elected you around that type of training. So they haven't had all of the nuances and discussion around that. I'm sure they'll talk about it at that dinner/training. But that is September 25th. Yep.
Which actually, I want to add one thing because you just reminded
Sure.
me of that. Because after reading that federal law, it also, I think, like, because we swear to defend in our oath of office the Constitution.
Yep.
So, like, how many of us know, do you know how many amendments there are in the Constitution? Or does anyone here?
I do, but it's not fair because I watched a whole bunch of videos on it today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean, we don't even know what we swore to defend.
Say
So
28.
I was going to propose that we take some, we ourselves educate ourselves on the Constitution that we swore to defend. That's all. So I don't know how you all feel about that, but we can keep that as an ongoing conversation. But I know, I'm gonna swear to defend something, it's like, I didn't even know what it said.
Yeah, every school employee in California also has to sign an oath to do that as well. Yep.
I can tell you, it's a past military person. It's pretty impressive when you defend.
When you swear, or with your life.
Yeah.
I talked a lot.
Okay.
All right, 9.2 superintendent's report.
Okay, just very quickly, and I'll project behind me. We, as the board is aware, and we talked about, and the great part is, of course, is when we say what we do, what we say, and we say what we do. So that is that we rolled out our new college and career electives in middle school. We are 3 weeks in, 2 actually, because the first week we didn't really implement to our college and career cycles of classes that are 6 weeks in length. Our teachers are doing incredibly well. They have created some really cool, and you can see them here, really cool.
Some of them.
Yeah, I know, really cool topics. electronic communication and coding, jewelry making, sing and strum. Right now, a really hot one is the electronic music and recording studio. So Miss Leo, our music teacher, really worked hard last year to try and get kids involved and like connect to, is it choir they want? Is it, guitar, whatever. And so she came up with this, and the kids are all in on it. And I think one of the most remarkable parts of this is that some of the music they're designing is actually going to be in our school play. So we're all working together to create this product, which is going to be our school play that includes the stagecraft and the painting and the designing of the set, the music behind it, the acting, the costuming, and it's really putting that idea to work where we're actually creating and implementing some skills that people will see, which is great. So we're off and running with that, and our teachers, have a lot of gratitude for the work that they did with that. And then the next thing I would just quickly show you is, as you guys know, we've continued with our newsletter. It has a slightly different look to it this year, but I think it looks great. Here's some of our great middle school students, but we're really just trying to not only highlight some of the key things that are happening in our district and things to look forward to, but also some tidbits in education, because the people that you employ here at Cayucas are experts in education, and that's why you've hired us. So this year was really around reading development and literacy tips. And then of course we highlight our awesome staff. We have formal communication around the LCAP. And then we did a section this year, or this one around and now you know. And it's just cool things to know about our school and our district, that as a list and kind of things to get aware of. And especially in the beginning of school around either our scratch cooking, which is increased to 40% of every meal is scratch cooked now, looking at our early out system, really our sports that are offered, our PTA involvement, Parent Square, all of those things. So, and then lastly, I'll always have a little message from me, because I believe that it's important to connect and to talk to everyone that reads ours. This one, I was lucky to highlight my mom and my mother-in-law, because we had Grandparents' Day this past Monday, where we had 50 adults at our flagpole. And remember, our school is only 100, well, and not say only, it is now 181 students, which is up 6% from last year. But we invited people to bring their grandparents, because they play a key role in raising our children. And so I did a nod to my mom and to my mother-in-law here, because I know without them, we wouldn't have gotten our kids picked up and delivered and all the things that they do. My mom still cooks a meal for us one night a week, because it's busy working and raising a family. And that we have a lot of gratitude for grandparents. And so we did that and honored also Patriots Day with a very short history lesson on 9/11 to our whole student body. A moment of silence, and really just a reminder of what makes our nation great around patriotism and coming together for a united cause to care for people, and a nod to our service providers during that. So it really started our week off in a very positive way. We weren't sure how many people would come, because we kind of left it as an open invitation. And Ishmael and Liz and I put out chairs, and we had probably like 15 to 20 chairs out. And all of a sudden we were like, we're going to need some more chairs, which is always a great thing to have. So we grabbed chairs quickly and had a wonderful week to start off our week. I guess it's only been 2 days, but so that is our report in a nutshell, other than the fact that Liz and Mary championed our volunteer training. That was yesterday morning. Same thing, which is that we were going to be very thrilled and excited to see about 20 to 25 people. We were at 37.
Nice.
So people who wanted to go through our training and our process, to drive our kids, to support our families, to volunteer within our school. So we are back and up and running, and we will continue to have open arms to people who want to help support our school. So that's where we're at.
Nice. All
right, 9.3 LCAP update.
Just very quickly, you'll see listed on the agenda, we've set our LCAP advisory meetings for the year. Our first one's tomorrow morning. That's poor planning on my part. We're doing a board meeting and are here 15 hours, and we'll see it tomorrow morning at 8. But we have a great group of parents who are LCAP advisory. We've advertised it throughout all our parent population. And tomorrow's topic is really looking at the steps that we provided as next steps to the areas of concern, kind of focus from last year's survey. I think parents will be happy to see that the 2 areas are ones that they'll see lifting, which includes that engagement in middle school electives and that transparency around student discipline, which we'll talk more about later. But the dates are listed here. And we look forward to that full process. The template from the state is not out yet. It is changing once again. So as soon as that actual template comes out, then Liz and I will start the work on that and what it looks like, and we'll update the board on what that will change or not change around our current LCAP, but it has not been released yet.
9.4 behavior and discipline guide.
I shared a preview to the board, and it's okay if you haven't watched it yet. It is not that exciting, but we have a new behavior discipline guide. It is completely correlated to educational code related to intervention prior to consequences around disciplinary action, and then kind of the full spectrum of services that we provide to help change behaviors, especially those of a negative sort that might be impacting student learning. So I have attached the full discipline guide here. And I think some of the really strong pages are in the very beginning and the very end. Not that the middle is not great as well, but the beginning really looks at responsibility and partnership. So there's a video going out to parents on Friday. It's 10 minutes in length, but they can listen and drive because you can play it, through YouTube. There's not a lot of visuals that you have to look at, but it really talks through this partnership of what is responsibility for each student and also what's a right for each student, right? They have a right to feel safe at school. They have a right to be at school and not be bullied. So it talks about responsibilities and rights for students, for parents, for teachers, and for administration. So you'll see slight changes within that lens. The video I sent the board as a preview, and that will go out to parents on Friday, really just focuses on that part of the guide. Because the guide is meaty, it's usually discipline in general is the reason why great teachers sometimes decide not to be administrators. It's not the fun task of our job and work. In fact, it's usually the most dreaded part of it. So I'm doing small chunks of training with this that really focuses in on, okay, this one's just rights and responsibilities of those parties that we just spoke of. The next one will talk about the layers of intervention and supports. And then the last section or the last training will really emphasize the consequences that can occur around the disciplinary action. So those are kind of the 3 phases of the guide, but also of our training. So that people are really aware of what we're doing and how and why we're doing it. Important to emphasize that the word is guide. One thing that is specifically emphasized in Ed Code is that it is not one size fits all. So a lot of times people outside of the administration want to say, if a child does A, they get B, but that's actually not allowed in Ed Code because a person's history matters, their story matters, the interventions you've employed matters, their age matters, all of those things. You can see that the last few pages of the guide said, hey, if you do this, likely some of these things will occur. But all of those will depend on those really important factors in those decisions. So that's sometimes frustrating because you want to know exactly what's going to happen, but there's not an exact answer. The exception to that are what are called the Big 5, which are violations of Ed Code 48915, which are the district's responsibility to consider expulsion. Those are things like having narcotics or drugs on campus to sell. Those are things like having weapons on campus. Those are things like looking at certain assault levels on campus, those type of things. So there's the big 5, which are emphasized in the back of the guide, and level 3. But other than that, there are nuances around the levels of support and actions of both the individual and the staff that matter in your decision making. So we are going to be on this journey of learning way too much about discipline with both our parent groups, our student groups, our teacher groups. So we're going over all of these with our teachers as well. So they're quite aware of it in these small chunks, so that we all feel empowered about those decisions of keeping our kids under positive behavior as well as a structured environment for learning. I think combated, or actually in combined, not combated, but in combination with that, you're going to hear a whole bunch, and you heard it at back to school night, the people who are able to attend, is we have launched and embraced what's called our positive behavior intervention, which is really having cohesive expectations on behavior. We have the big 4 there, which is being safe, responsible, respectful, and kind. And it's what our teachers are emphasizing, our playground supervisors. It's what we talk about in sports. It's what we acknowledge in a positive way. And we've asked last week through a communication with parents and also the newsletter, partner with us. So if you see your child doing that, or any of our kids out in the community using that same language, they'll see that it's this wonderful hug of embracing those good human qualities of safe, responsible, respectful, and kind. And those are really things that are going to make our Cayucos Falcons stand out above just children in general if they really embrace those actions and behavioral traits, which is great. And that's all I have with
Can I
that.
add a short comment about
Of
that?
course you
Thank you.
can.
A parent did come up to me at Flagpole and said that those same words, safe, responsible, respectful, and kind, were promoted at her last school in the Midwest. And she adopted it at her house and actually has signs around her house that that's how she raises her children.
Oh, neat.
And she
Yeah.
said she couldn't believe how well it worked at the school and in her own home. So
That's
Very
great.
nice.
short comment. Sorry, I forgot to tell you about that.
That's
Okay.
wonderful.
Okay, so now we're on the consent agenda with the exception of 10.6 that was pulled at the beginning. Does somebody want to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make the motion that we approve the consent agenda, numbers, 10.6.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Trustee Ross.
Aye.
Trustee Castillo.
Aye.
Trustee Friend.
Aye.
Trustee Wright.
Aye.
Trustee Brownell.
Aye.
5-0 passes.
So do we do 10.6 at the end of action, or do we do that at the beginning of action?
It doesn't matter, actually. Typically, the process is we discuss it now.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so now it's action, do we have to change the action item number?
Nope, we would just discuss 10.6
Okay.
that's been pulled, and then it would have its separate motion or not from the board.
All right, Susan, I'll leave it up to you because you pulled it.
Super easy, super simple, just wanted to delay, adopting any policies. CSBA has opposed the Senate Bill AB 1078. It's sitting on Newsom's desk. And they don't like that bill, but either way, I just thought it might be better to delay voting on any policies.
What is that bill? What's 1078?
The curriculum bill. The school boards no longer have power over the curriculum, that the governor has the power over the curriculum.
Oh, that's for the Temecula.
I don't know, but either way, CSBA opposes it as well. So just a suggestion that we just hit the pause button on, passing any policies right now until that gets settled.
I would be okay passing this policy because this is about the library. It's not necessarily about,
But it's all about materials and whatnot.
I would still consider voting for it.
Do you know about that bill? Jen?
I know a little bit about it, but I would probably need to do a little bit more research, and I do think that there's some partisan politics around the bill that have really clouded some of what's happening. And so I'm hopeful that those things will settle out and that, yeah, I have no problem tabling this. It's not going to drastically impact our procedures, and we could look at it again next month and see where we're at. Staff is completely fine with that, but it's definitely up to the board.
Do we need a motion?
Yeah.
I'll make a motion, we table it till next month.
I'll second
Any further discussion? Trustee Castillo,
Aye.
trustee Friend,
Aye.
trustee Wright,
Aye.
trustee Brownell,
Aye.
trustee Ross.
it.
Motion item is tabled until next board meeting.
Action section 11.1, review approved donation.
So the year has just started, and we already have a very generous donation from the Cayucas Educational Fund. So Liz was able to attend the CEF meeting. She talked to them about a letter I had created. I was asked by numerous service providers, or community partners, that like, what is it that you guys need? What are things that you want? And so I gave everyone the same information, and they elected to donate $3,000 towards the following items. One of them is in our library. We are bringing in some more comfortable seating. Right now, really the only seating, the kids sit on the ground. They have a carpet and they have little spongy seats they sit on, but this would give, especially for non-structured reading time, so at recess, at break, after school, a very lovely kind of like couch setting with the books in the middle. It's really going to invite even more kids into that idea that we want to sit there with a book, which we love. So it's a little pricey. So they have donated $1,000. The unit itself costs roughly $4, but it's, you know, the material that you can wash off and keep germs free, and it should be here for a very long time into the future. They also did $1,000 towards new middle school electives, which we're putting towards our Lego engineering class, which I know is going to be one of the highlights, but also some disappointment because there's only so many kids that you can have in that class. Again, it's a little bit expensive to launch, but after you have the equipment, then you'll be just fine. So we appreciate that. And then lastly, $1,000 towards our fall theater production of materials for stagecraft, any type of costumes needed. And then the rights to the scripts are usually run anywhere from $500 to $1,000 to use the rights to a script. So we want to thank publicly CEF for that, and also staff recommends approval.
Retired.
I know.
I move that we accept the $3,000 donation from CEF.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Trustee Friend,
Aye.
trustee
Aye.
Wright, trustee
Aye.
Brownell, trustee Ross,
Aye.
trustee Castillo.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, we are 11.2, review approved 23-24 unaudited actuals financial report.
Okay, so I'm going to get this up on the screen here. Let's see here. Looks like it is viewing. So I will try to make this painless for you. I do believe that the best part of this is the attachment that you see in the narrative form around, it was attached to the agenda. It is the first section in the handouts that the board members have. The unaudited actuals is really looking at, we made a projection of our budget last year. And how well or close did we get to that projection? When we look at all the accounts that allotted money, they close out all of those counts. The school year ends June 30. We basically spend July and August pulling back all those monies so that it comes back to that fund balance. And then we look at where we're at. We also have an outside auditing firm. They come here tomorrow and Friday that do a formal audit of our funds too. But this gives us the opportunity to look at our funds so that we are, you know, the airplane's already in the sky and we're flying. How well are we doing? Or we need to make any budget adjustments? So we have the goal of verifying our assumptions. Those assumptions would be our, especially for us, our projections around property tax income, state and federal monies that we projected out based on enrollment, that fund our programs. How did we look at what we had allotted for expenditures, specifically staffing expenditures, which are our largest expense? And then also, was there anything that looked at in accounts payable that was an anomaly that we should have been more mindful of, or that there wasn't a predicting that we couldn't have, and are things that we need to look at and think about? I did add some nice graphics because usually funding is not the most exciting topic. So I decided to add some color and some other great things on here. The SACS department, which is the state accounting codes, are really what you're going to see in your bound copy here. So you're going to see your 1,000s, your 2,000s, your 3,000s, your 4,000s, and those all are part of the state accounting system on how they code, for example, material and supplies, certificated costs, classified costs, and they're all coded out. So that's why we take those spreadsheets and numbers and we make a narrative account. And then also most districts will do a PowerPoint calling out some of those key areas. Page 4 of page 4 really looks on your narrative account, looks at what's called your restricted and your unrestricted revenues. So the money coming into the district. You'll see that you have numerous columns here. The first column was the adopted budget a year ago in June. So actually, it's one of the last things that Mr. Smith did prior to leaving is he projected based on last year, hey, this is what we're thinking we're going to expend. And then that's what we used all throughout the year. Then throughout the year, we made course correction, which is always what happens with your first interim and your second interim as things shifted and changed with either money coming in or out. So our adopted budget looked at total money coming in at roughly $4.4 million. You'll see at first interim there you see a larger increase with that. And that major increase is going to come through state dollars. We got more state funding than what it was originally projected. There is scuttle always around it, but what you've seen the last few years around, and Trustee Friend and I sat through the governor's budget revisions and the trainings around that. But what you'll see is that they used to be like clockwork. In December, you'd get an indication about the governor's budget. It would officially roll out around January, where you get a lot of the big pockets. Then in May, you see the big May revise. So the budgeter dips their cards in January and says, hey, these are the key things. Here's what I'm thinking of funding at this type of percentage. Then basically from January to May, there's all the play of politics and how that money is going to come out. You typically, not this year, would get information around income tax levels that help feed the state budget. So you make those course adjustments. Then you get the May revise, which gives you your course for your state funded programs like schools. And then you adopt your budget in June. That's our normal cycle. But what we're seeing happening is that as we've shifted where income taxes are being collected, all those indications aren't as strong as they used to be. So course corrections, either in the positive or negative, are happening much later. So you'll see greater variance in your first interim that you haven't seen in the past. So the good news is that you see a positive uptick. So we got more state dollars than had originally been projected. Then you'll see in second interim and first interim, we were steady. So and there's not a lot of change that happens within that September to that December, January time. And then you have your end of year actuals. The positive of this is that we're all talking about money coming in, revenue. And you'll see that we actually dipped up a little bit more at our year end on money coming into our district. So those are all positive things that occurred throughout the year. It is typically the struggle of presenting unaudited actuals is when you see the flip of that. And that's what happened in 2008 and 9, which was just absolutely horrible for school districts because there was all this promised money, all the budgets made, all the people hired. And then we went into a recession and money's pulled back and just one pocket after another. And then districts going, but I already have these people, but I already have these programs. And that's where you saw that sort of freeze of what was happening and a lot of worry in a lot of districts in California about making payroll, those type of things. But in the state we're at right now, that's not the trend you're seeing yet, but we know that there's economic cycles in California. So next you see property tax. So 69% of our funding, I believe that's the number, I'll double check here. Yep, 69% of our funding in Cayucas is from property tax. It used to be called a basic aid district. It's now called a community funded district. And you'll see these trends here. In black is not a trend. It's the actual thing that happened with property tax. And in orange, it is the projection. You'll notice here that in 23-24, which is this current school year, the property tax increase is only at 2.63. And I'll tell you, and there's a note on here as well, this was the number taken from the second interim from our fiscal advisor. So our fiscal advisor hired through the San Luis Obispo County Office of Education. Throughout the year, the property taxes are, you know, kind of a target that are happening. And then towards that close of the year is when you get your full number, actually until the fall of that following year, September-ish, you know how much all was collected to help fund that school district. So it's a rolling number throughout. So very typically we should, as you see on averages, either base at 4 or 5%. So at first interim, we will see an adjustment at that 2.63 to be at that 4%. Because that's more likely the number that we're going to be funded at this year. The hard part about property tax funding in our district is that you'll notice I'm talking about the current year we're in, and we're still projecting the funding for 70% of our budget. But that's how the cycle of property tax collection happens. The good news is that you don't have usually extreme volatility within the property tax. You see, we're roughly sitting at that 5%. We had a great increase in 22, 23, but we're projecting it to be at 4 or 5. The importance of that accurate number and changing 2.63 to that 4% is that we don't want to be less than transparent. If we kept it incredibly low and didn't have a reason, it would look like we're trying to hide money, and we're not. Period. End of story. Full stop. So it will be adjusted. It was based on that second interim. And so there will be an increase of our bottom line when that first interim happens. Next, page 6 of the narrative, which is the first section, looks at special education funding. And I know that especially board members who have been on the board for quite some time know that special education is a very poorly funded mandate, meaning that basically federal and state money pay about 40% of the total cost of it takes to have a fully operating special education program. And you'll see that that's almost locks in step with what we have. In Cayucas, we get $35,000 from the federal government. State government, we get about $135,000, and then we have some local local additions to that. And then you have our contribution. So you'll see we're contributing about 41% of the cost. So we have a little bit higher, meaning that they're funding 59%. So we see a little bit of a benefit there. It's also because we're incredibly small. Roughly special education costs is $400,000 a year right now to service our students with individual disability needs. That's both within our district program as well as what we contract out to specialized programs with San Luis Coastal for students with more severe disabilities. It includes special education transportation of those students as well. And any type of additional consulting that we do with San Luis Obispo County Office of Ed, for example, with looking at our adaptive PE or assistive technology, speech and language therapy, all of those things. Because we're so little, it would be hard to employ those individuals with highly skilled, high wage jobs on our own. So we work in partnership with San Luis Obispo County Office of Ed for those. Okay. Our next, oops, sorry about that. Here we go. Our next one is one-time funds. So addition to our ongoing revenue, the state over the last 3.5 years we really have seen this flood of one-time funding. My colleague Liz likes to call it Christmas money. It's that flood of money that comes in. You're like, oh, I could buy these things that I could never buy before, but you can't rely on it month after month after month. You are finally seeing a sunset to a vast majority of these one-time funds. Most of them were COVID and pandemic-based funds. That's where you see all those top ones that say ESSER are all based in that educational, it's a elementary and secondary educational recovery act monies. You'll see the ones that have zero balance remaining. That's a good thing because they had to be expended by a certain date. And those funds that basically the top, oh my goodness, all the way down to right prior to education or effectiveness grant are all COVID related funds. And we have earmarked expenditures for almost all of those. They all needed to be sunsetted by the end of this school year, if not before.
Just a quick, is there like, that's a lot of money. Like, what are just some general things that money went towards? I mean,
Yeah.
Cleaning, hygiene.
Yep. Yeah. So, there was a flood of money that came in. So during that time, there was a lot of different expenditures. For a short amount of time, you had a bunch of staff that was being paid out of those monies that helped build up the district reserves, a completely acceptable use of funds. For example, a portion of every paraeducator was used to
Yeah, but you weren't here though.
Nope,
for that,
no.
I just recall our
Oh yeah,
revenue didn't
the
go-
vast majority of these large amounts were expended before I was here.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Another very large expenditure was around like your filter systems. You had some technology based to do more, at home online learning, but the vast majority of those ESSER funds were expended on staffing costs.
Staffing.
Yeah.
What about some of these that we haven't spent any?
Yep.
Like child nutrition?
Yeah.
Infrastructure and training?
Yep. We just got that grant in July.
Oh,
Yep. So that grant, wonderful grant. The previous grant, you'll notice that we've spent some of those dollars, but we've looked at, like, for example, a new dishwasher, a new freezer, all of those things done will help bring our kitchen up to the standard it needs to be. And that's wonderful. And the kitchen infrastructure and training also has to be directly tied to the scratch cooking increase. So it helps us buy the materials needed. We have a huge blender now, and training of staff related to increase scratch cooking, which is wonderful. Yeah, but the big one we just got officially in July. So it's our first influx of money.
Okay.
Great question. The educator effectiveness grant is what we're utilizing to spend some professional learning for our teachers. And they are pumped. And I mean, like, really, I would say thrilled, but I think they're pumped. We are doing, we're taking 6 people to what's called Get Your Teach On, and it really talks about this interactive, connective classroom, and that the old ways of teaching and engaging students, it's just different, right? Because kids have different structures in which they relate to, and like, how do you engage and make this classroom like a all-encompassing experience? Not for every single thing you teach, but I have a great team going to that. We have some teachers going to math training, which was going to be a wonderful collaborative, some restorative practices, and then trauma-informed care for students that have layers of needs. And so you're trying to teach basic skills, but their layers of needs haven't been met. So balancing that. So those are some of our big trainings that are going in that area. Okay, next one is number 8, which is other revenue. So in addition to our property tax, our one-time monies, then these are the other revenues that we have in our budget, in our sort of coffers, as you would say. So we do, through our interdistrict transfers, have a very large chunk of money that we receive, and we should probably see an uptick in that as we have increased our interdistrict transfers. We have 21 new faces on our campus this year. That does not include kinder or TK. Those would be all additional little faces too. And half of those are kiddos that moved to the area, live right here in Cayucas. And then the other half are interdistrict transfers. So we're doing some great things that are bringing some kiddos to our school, and we're really proud of that. And they're being very successful. Yeah,
I'm sorry, this is backtracking a tiny minute.
No comment for you.
What'd you say?
I was just giving her grief. It's in a moment of grief.
Oh.
For once.
So, I forgot my question, sorry.
Blame Chris.
No, has anybody figured out after all the gets paid for, like how much is actually being spent on our kids? Like how much is each individual kid's education? Like, are they 10,000? Are they 15,000? Like, does anybody know based on the money we
Yeah.
get?
Well, you
Do
think
we
the
know how
total
much-
revenue divided by kids.
yeah. So there is actually in the first interim, I believe there's actually a figure that you will see. I'm trying to remember if it was in our budget or our first or second interim. There is a figure that says per pupil expenditures, and it's actually different at elementary and middle school levels. And it's something that's reported to the state of California every year in, oh, that's what it's in. It's in our SARCs. So it's in our student accountability report card where it says how much money we spend per student per
Okay,
year.
Yeah, that's just kind of.
Yep.
I remember being familiar with that, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, and I've lost track of.
Yeah, I'll send that to this, the board members though. It's really easy to pull. It's in the SARC, yeah. Okay, next we have, our other revenues. This is where you have donations that come in. If we get grants, those type of things. I did want to let the board know I am exploring, the availability of a career technical education grant. Because we have now, a more, menu and robust ability to offer college and career exploration and classes. Our new drama teacher has what's called a career technical education credential. We will be eligible to apply for that. So I am exploring that possibility right now. It's one of the largest grants I wrote in Paso Robles, and the state. It's a state funded program that really looks at the things that we're already doing in our electives. Our mock interview process, all of those things of getting our kids ready for the real world. I believe that we'll be able to get some state matching dollars. So we'll quickly move through that process if we can, and I'll update the board on that because the timeline's kind of fast. And I was like, let's do this. Okay, so we talked a lot about money coming in. Let's talk about money going out. So in addition to obviously getting all this money, we spend a lot of money, which is exactly what it's for, which is to educate and support the future of our community. You'll notice here the vast majority of our monies is spent in certificated and classified salaries, specifically certificated. And this is what we have budgeted. Don't worry about the parentheses. It means actually the positive. I always look at it as a negative, but when you look at it there, it means that we had indicated that we would spend X dollars, but we actually have this money left. So anything in parentheses is adding to our bottom line. So this is why you're going to see the end of the story is a increase in our reserves because we have just under an $500,000 as we close out our books, more than we had predicted. A huge part of that came in materials and supplies. And that's because we had, when Scott built the budget, they looked at an adoption cycle for science. And so when you do an adoption, it's going to cost the district a little bit more money. We are doing that adoption cycle this year. So that money didn't go away anywhere, but like it wasn't $200,000 wasn't spent because we're going to do that process this year. So it's great. It's great news. It's actually really great news. So what you'll see here, and this is the most important numbers when we look at our fiduciary responsibility as stewards of the district in relation to funds, is that as we do our unaudited actuals, our reserve is sitting right now at 31.92%. Our adopted budget had the reserve predicted at 22.9. The good news is quick math shows you on the page before, I said we're just under $500,000. Our budget is roughly 5 million. So that 10% swing makes a lot of sense as it is added to the bottom line. With that said, You'll see in the years out that reserve, you'll see a slight dip in 24, 25. That's all those one-time monies are gone. So that you have to count for them being spent. And so you see that little dip, it's still 25% in the reserve category. And then you'll see that increase in 25, 26 at 28%. With that said, I would like my next step to be is to, the official result is that we have positive certification in our unaudited actuals. But the first interim will come in December. But prior to that, I would like to bring a spending plan, which my husband laughs at because he thinks I have a spending plan like every month, but an expenditure plan for the district that's prioritized based on input from our parents, our students, and our staff related to that chunk of money that has kind of inflated our reserve. Because there are things that we should be spending money on. And some of those relate to facilities. At most of them relate to our facilities. An example of that is we have already purchased this, but in our first grade, we had desks that were about 30 years old in that. So they were wonderfully like new screws, kind of put them back together. But you know, that was substantially old desks for our kids. So we put in it limited because they were big, huge, kind of larger table desks. So any type of movement within the classroom was quite cumbersome. Now we have new, smaller desks that fit the first graders. They have their own little book box in there and the appropriate size desk. So those type of things that we'd like to look at and really put a thoughtful list out there to our different community partners and say, what do these things look like as a priority to you? And then bring that back to the board to make some decisions. And that's our unaudited actuals. So I'll say staff recommends approval, but of course we can have further questions and discussion around it.
You covered it pretty well.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I move that we approve the unaudited actuals for the school year 2022.
A second.
Any further discussion?
Sort of comment. I remember in years past, we'd also talked about just longer term maintenance needs. Is that
Yep.
something that's still kind of ongoing?
Yes. So in the closing of the books, I had directed, thank you for bringing that up. I actually directed our fiscal agent to put a larger chunk, and I can't recall the amount, I believe it's $50,000 into what's called Fund 25, which is for maintenance, because we used a lot of that in building the new building. And so that is putting that in that restricted reserve of facilities. That then once it's in Fund 25, only board action will take to take it out of that and use it for something other than facilities.
Mm-hmm.
So we did do that chunk of change, and I'm going to verify the amount, but I believe it was 50,000. We had the money and it was very low. And so both, actually, I think it's,
I think even like the
Might
maintenance-
be-
the maintenance guys have talked about, condition of the, say the roof or things like that.
Yep.
Just estimates going forward. For things that might
yeah, those are things that will be on that priority list. You got it. Yep. Those are exact the things, or the play structure down below that's 1,085 years old. But yeah, those things, the reseeding of the grass and the leveling, those are some of those major things that we're going to bring in that priority list, separate from the fact that we should have a cushion around our facility maintenance in case, a tree falls and there is a hole in the roof, that we have funds set aside for that. Yep. Perfect.
Any further discussion? Trustee Wright?
Aye.
Trustee Brownell? Trustee Ross? Trustee Castillo?
Aye.
Trustee Friend?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
2023-02 adopting the GAN.
So this correlates to the information that you just shared. I'll go ahead and read the summary of it, which is California Proposition 4, which was in 1979, which is also known as the GAN limit, named after the sponsor of the bill, was approved by voters with the goal of keeping state and local government spending, including school spending, capped at the 1978-79 levels. And this is, of course, adjusted with any population or inflation. The GAN limit is a result of Prop 13, which we all are familiar with when we talk about school funding, which was passed the year prior in 1978. And Prop 4, which was also passed in 79, which limits the growth of government spending. So the GAN limit limits the growth of government spending. As a result, there is a cap on local government revenue that can be appropriated in any fiscal year. There is also an appropriation limit for state expenditures. So basically what they're saying is, as these lovely monies come in at the end of the year, much like we just talked about our unaudited actuals, where you sit with a balance, there should be some type of appropriation of what percentage of that or what limit of that can be expended for new government projects, or what still needs to be then looked at or used within school-based funding, or actually, and so there's actually two buckets that it could be used for. So when more monies come in from the state, it could be given or expended through school-based funding or back to taxpayers. So it can't just be, wow, we have more money, now we're going to spend more money. There needs to be a balance and a recognition of what that occurs with these mandates that are public education, and then even looking at tax breaks. So the GAN limit resolution is on there. It shows that we have met our GAN limit. So it means that we are correlated to the increased expenditure and appropriation of funds, and also our increase of funds that have occurred within our district. And that's what the resolution calls out. And I believe it's $173,000 increase. But I will pull it up. It is? Okay, great. So $173,000 increase, and that's what's been allotted by the district too. So staff recommends approval of the GAN limit resolution, and this is an annual process we need to do as a checks and balance within our system.
I'll make a motion that we approve resolution 2023-02 adopted again.
Any further discussion? Trustee Brownell.
Aye.
Trustee Ross.
Aye.
Trustee Castillo.
Aye.
Trustee Friend.
Aye.
Trustee Wright.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
11.4, consolidated application 2023-24.
I'm getting all these lovely fiscal things out of the way for the year. They're wonderful. I no offense to anyone who spends their life in fiscal. Education. Okay, consolidated app is the application for federal funding. It looks at title or categorical funding from the federal government. We roughly sit at between $50,000 and $60,000 a year that we get from federal dollars that are earmarked for what is called Title I, Title II, Title III, and then possibly Title IV, although we don't have those funds this year. Title I is for low socioeconomic students that have large challenges, as well as students that might be learning a second language or who fall under homeless and foster. So very similarly aligned to the LCAP as that population. Title II is in professional learning and development of staff. And Title III is for migrant students, looking at the challenges related to students that are part of a migrant population based in agriculture. So like I said, we look at anywhere between $50,000 and $60,000 a year. These funds actually are attributed to our intervention teacher and our counselor. So that's how we spend them. So staff recommends approval of the consolidated application.
Make a motion that we approve the consolidated application for 2023-24.
Any further discussion? Trustee Ross.
Aye.
Trustee Castillo.
Aye.
Trustee Friend.
Aye.
Trustee Wright.
Aye.
Trustee Brownell. Motion passes 5-0.
Thanks, Mary.
11.5, review approved resolution 2023-01 regarding sufficiency or insufficiency of instructional material.
So after our lively public hearing on this topic, staff is happy to report that we have sufficient materials. I want to thank Our leads, which would be our cluster chairs, Jessica Peterson, Joanne Montgomery, and Liz Villalobos, our principal, who affirm and attest to the fact that everyone in their grade levels have what they need. We also brought this up at our staff meeting and made sure, is there anything are there any textbooks, workbooks, supplemental materials that's adopted by the district that we are not in compliance with that you need? They have all agreed that they have their materials. And so staff recommends approval for the 2023-24 school year of having sufficient materials for our staff and students.
Make a motion to approve resolution 2023-01.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Trustee Castillo,
Aye.
trustee Friend,
Aye.
trustee Wright, trustee Brownell,
Aye.
trustee Ross.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
12, review of action items, tasking and calendar.
So this is the point of the meeting where if there are agenda items that are coming up or calendar events, we discuss and talk about, should it be in our next agenda? We will have our tabled item, which is great. And we'll have our students presenting, which is even better. Is there anything else that we're looking at for that next, I can't believe it, October meeting already. October 11th. Yeah, I mean, and obviously it's an ongoing process, but if there was something that was in particular. All right.
All righty, then we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks for everybody to sign.
Oh, yes, yes, please.